Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about something that's, well, it can be really tough, even painful. Why is there so much conflict in church? I mean, it's supposed to be the safe place, right? So why doesn't it always feel that way?
And maybe you've asked this exact question yourself. It's a question that almost always comes from a place of genuine hurt. So many people end up walking away from church, not because they've lost their faith in God, but because they've been deeply wounded by the very community that was supposed to be a safe harbor. It's a really heavy question, and it definitely deserves an honest look. Okay, so let's get into it. Where does this painful disconnect even start? A lot of the time, it really just begins with our expectations. We walk in the door with this idea, this picture in our heads of what church should be. And then, when the reality doesn't quite match up with that picture, well, that's when disappointment and hurt can rush in. I absolutely love this quote. It's kind of funny, right? But it's also so true. And why is it true? Because we're there. You and we're part of it. The truth is, nowhere in the Bible are we promised a perfect church, not here on earth anyway. In fact, it pretty much says the opposite, that every single one of us falls short. And this right here really gets to the heart of the whole misunderstanding. We walk in expecting a museum, full of perfect, polished saints. But what we actually find is more like a hospital for sinners. It's not some finished masterpiece hanging on a wall. It's an active construction site. And let's be real, construction sites are always messy. All right, so if we can all agree that the church is just full of imperfect people, then what's the real root of all this conflict? Because it goes a whole lot deeper than just a simple disagreement over, say, the color of the carpet. Interestingly, the book of James in the Bible asks this exact question, and it is sharp. It doesn't tiptoe around it at all. It basically forces us to stop pointing fingers and start looking inward to find the source of all our external fights. And what's our first instinct? Usually it's to blame personality clashes. We just say, oh, we just don't get along. Our personalities just don't mix. And hey, those differences are totally real, but they're not the ultimate source of the big conflicts. And if it's not that, our next go-to is usually blaming poor communication. And don't get me wrong, learning to speak and listen better is absolutely crucial. But here's the thing. Even with perfect communication skills, you still can't solve the deeper problem we're about to get into. Okay, so here it is, the real root. The Bible says our fights and quarrels come from the desires that are battling inside of us. To put it really simply, it's that part of us that wants to be king. We all have this deep down desire to be in charge, to have our own way. And it's not just in our own lives. A lot of the time, we want to rule over other people's lives too. So you can think of this inner self as the furnace where conflict is actually created, right? When someone doesn't meet our expectations, or they make us feel uncomfortable, or they don't agree with our opinion, that little king inside us feels threatened. And what happens when two people, each with a powerful desire to be king, run into each other? Well, the result is pretty much always a crash where both people get hurt. Wow, that's a pretty challenging thought, isn't it? It really forces us to ask ourselves a tough question. In that last conflict you had, was it really your love that was wounded? Or was it your pride, your ego, your need to be in control? It just goes to show you, the real battleground isn't out there with other people. It's usually right inside our own hearts. So this all leads us to a completely different way of looking at this. What if conflict isn't a sign that everything's going wrong? What if it's actually a sign that God is at work? What if all that friction is the very tool he's using to build something beautiful inside of us? Let's try an analogy. Imagine the church is a building that God is constructing. And we, you and me, we're all the living stones he's using. Now, think about a construction site. It's noisy, it's dusty, it's super messy. Stones are constantly getting bumped and scraped against each other. But here's the cool part. It's that very friction, that bumping and scraping, that God uses to smooth out our rough edges. It's how he chips away at our pride, our self-centeredness, and that pesky need to be king. Okay, so if we know all this, how in the world are we supposed to live together? Well, this brings us to what I think is the true test of love. It's not about finding perfect people to love. It's about learning how to love imperfect people. Think about it. If our relationships are built only on good feelings, They're going to shatter the very first time we feel uncomfortable or hurt. Our immediate reaction will be to run, to avoid, to just cut that person off. But if a relationship is built on something deeper, on real committed love, then even after being hurt, the core desire is still there to repair, to restore, and to reconnect. Because here's the thing, the real measure of our heart isn't how we treat people when they're easy to be around. Anyone can do that. The real test is how we respond when they're being difficult, when they're, for lack of a better word, unlovely. That is the moment when love stops being just a feeling and becomes a conscious choice, a choice to reflect the kind of radical love that we ourselves have been given. So let's kind of bring this all together for a final thought. Conflict in church? It's not a sign that God has failed or that the church is broken. It's actually a sign that his big construction project is still underway, in you and in me. These moments of friction, they act like a mirror, showing us what's really sitting on the throne of our hearts. And that leaves us with a final question, something to really take with us. The next time you find yourself in a conflict and you're feeling hurt, you're ready to fight back, maybe just pause. And maybe the first question to ask isn't, why on earth did they do that to me? But instead, a quieter question. In this moment, who is truly on the throne of my heart? Thanks so much for digging into this with me.